To have a very special guest, Albert Milo Jr. He's the head of Related Urban Development. They focus on affordable housing. And we're going to be diving into a lot of different things that are happening here in South Florida. Albert, thank you for your time here.
Thank you, Brian, for this opportunity and looking forward to our time together.
So, for the audience that doesn't know what you do specifically at Related or what the Related Urban Group does, can you give a high level breakdown of that?
Yeah, so Related Urban is the affordable and workforce housing division of the Related Group, which was founded by my partner, George Perez, in 1979. And we deal with a lot of the different public-private partnerships. As you know, majority of our work is in that space, but we work a lot with different municipalities, different housing authorities, and trying to create um, true mixed income projects where we have a combination of affordable workforce and market rate units to build these type of projects that will be different than the traditional affordable housing project that most people are familiar with.
So, for the audience that doesn't know what workforce and affordable housing is or how that even connects, or even if they don't connect, can you give a breakdown of what that is?
Yeah, so historically, the tax credit program, which was part of passed in 1986 during President Reagan's time in office, created a financing vehicle where you were able to generate tax credit investments for affordable housing units that were historically 60% of the area median income or below. Um, and that ran like that basically for over 30 years. It was now in the last administration that they changed in 2017 the new tax program where it allowed it to change to an income averaging approach, and now you can do tax credit units up to 80%, which were historically considered just above that affordable cutoff point of 60%. So from a global perspective, typically affordable housing units are 60% and below. Now some of them can go up to 80, but the workforce kind of starts at 80 to 120. That's that missing middle that you hear a lot about now, based on the last few years. And then above that is usually considered to be more unrestricted market rate units.
So, for workforce housing, there's the idea whenever affordable and workforce housing are mentioned together that it's Section 8 or extremely low income. Is that what workforce housing is?
No, it's not. I mean, I think that's a big misconception that a lot of people place on these projects. They hear the word affordable housing and then they automatically gravitate to the Section 8 program and those type of housing units, which are subsidized, right? Those are programs that are specifically mostly for families or individuals that are 30% or 40% of earning income or below in many cases. And so the government pays 70% of their rent. That's a different type of funding program. That's totally different than traditional affordable or workforce housing.
So, you're a Miami native, you've grown up here, you lived here, you developed here, and done business here. How do you feel about all the changes that we're seeing, especially at the point now where it's very unaffordable for most of the people that live here, especially the locals, to live and grow family here?
Yeah. So look, as someone that was born in Miami, um, it's and been in this real estate business. I mean, I started off as a realtor when I was 18 years old, right? So I've been in the real estate business now almost 40 years. So I've seen the evolution of Miami. I recall when I would started off when I would buy properties and fix them and sell them. What you were able to purchase a property for back then. Um, and so the evolution of Miami and the growth of Miami is good. However, like everything, there are unintended consequences, right? And so there's a lot more challenges for young professionals to be able to certainly purchase a house, right? That has gotten very, very expensive. But even rents, right? Rents are a lot more expensive, and it is concerning because I take myself as an example. When I was starting off, I was just didn't have, I didn't come from parents with money. My dad was a truck driver, and my mom worked in data processing. So, but I was able to get into this business. I was able to find a way to um, little by little climb the ladder of, and I was able to buy my first house, and that's a lot more challenging today. And so as someone that has grown up here in Miami, I like the fact that Miami has now become more of an international city, more of a, now more recently a tech hub, and there's a lot more business. However, I am concerned about the opposite side of the coin, which is the challenges for specifically young professionals to afford housing, right? I think that's important, because without that, then how's Miami going to survive long term, right? Um, when I started in this business on the affordable housing development side, which was in 1999, at that point 60% of AMI units, 50% of AMI units, those were truly affordable, right? They were truly for people that were in the hospitality sector, they were in the retail sector, they were, in some other lower paying jobs. But if you were a young professional, or if you were a working professional, if you were a nurse, if you were a teacher, if you were a police officer, if you were, a starting accountant, if different, a lot of different professions, for the most part, you didn't have a problem finding housing. You would, go work with a broker, and whether you chose to rent or buy, you had the ability to go and find a property that was affordable for your income bracket. But slowly that is not the case, right? So it's it's a challenge that we're working on. It's a real challenge because it's no longer affordable housing is no longer a conversation strictly about lower income brackets. Now it is, the pendulum has swung, and it has affected, and it is affecting, uh, again, college educated young professionals in a multitude of careers. That is a problem for us to sustain the growth and the evolution of Miami.
So what does it take to actually develop affordable housing units, or actually just overall developments that people can actually afford, whether to rent or to actually own?
Yeah, so I think on the purchase side, there's certainly more challenges, right? Because Miami is land constraint. And so historically, I think you're seeing a lot of the older neighborhoods of Miami, that are going to be, people are looking at opportunities of houses that might be 60, 70 years old. And they're going to think about probably purchasing those and demolishing those and trying to build new housing stock in the established neighborhoods of Miami. Um, Conversely, if you're gonna build a lot of product for sale with a higher amount of volume, you're gonna have to look into the further outskirts of Miami-Dade County, down south, out west. We know that there's still a lot of debate as to whether they're going to move the UDB line or not move the UDB line. So if you're going to be a big production builder, you're going to look for those large tracts of land. If you're going to try to be a little bit more of a custom builder, then you're probably going to look in some of the more established neighborhoods of Miami, South Miami, even the core of the city of Miami, Hialeah. There's a lot of different neighborhoods, Coral Gables, a little closer in, that some of those older properties are probably going to be looked at and knocked down and redeveloped. On the rental side, I think it's about production, right? You can't affect the price unless you increase the supply. And that is easier said than done, right? Because same same situation, as the large parcels of land to build a lot of houses. You don't want all the production to be down south, right? Because that's not necessarily where the employment base is, right? The employment base is in the downtown area, in the Brickell area, in the Gables area, in the Civic Center area, in the Hospital VA area. Those are the airport, seaport. Those are the main hubs of employment, and so you want to have housing in and around those areas. So again, those are more established, older neighborhoods. Zoning is a big part that comes into play. How do you take these parcels and develop denser projects, which has its own sets of challenges, right? Cost wise, so it's not an easy formula to do, but it's certainly doable. We've been able to show that you can build in these more infill areas. You will, build in a vertical product and have a diversity of incomes in these projects.
So when you're underwriting these deals and you're looking at the costs associated with it, I guess we'll look at two things, right? The cost and the time. What's like the bottleneck of the development process that you're seeing that's taking up that if it were to be resolved, we can actually bring more affordable units?
So no question about it. The bottleneck is always permitting. I mean, if there is one, if I had a genie in a bottle and I had the ability to ask the genie just one wish, then the wish would be allow me to permit these projects in a quicker fashion, right? There's no ifs, ands, or buts to that, right? So there's the process from inception of a project to finally obtaining the permit is always the most challenging bottleneck in the process. Um, and there's different reasons for that. But we've been working collectively previously at the city at Miami-Dade County. Actually, this project that we're sitting in here today, Gallery at Markey Park, this project was a project that the county um, took over the zoning jurisdiction and was done on the rapid transit zone zoning. And through an initiative for then County Commissioner Eileen Higgins, who's now City of Miami Mayor Eileen Higgins, we worked together with the county and we were able to obtain a permit for this project here, which is 170 something units in 107 days. We've never been able to do that previously. But it took a collective effort from all of the different agencies within the county to allow us to do that. And that's huge because what happens is that, to your point of underwriting, you're underwriting a deal today based upon your plans, based upon your current construction bids, what your lenders are offering you on your interest rate, how long you think it's going to take to build your project. And those are underwriting assumptions are only good for so long. But if you take a year or longer to to obtain a permit, then those underwriting assumptions are no longer good. Your cost, your project you thought was 50 million is now 52 million, 53 million, right? Your interest rate is volatile, right? We're seeing it today. There's different geopolitical events that affect interest rates. So there's so many things that affect the ability for you to deliver that product. And ultimately, if the project costs you more, then you're going to have a harder time renting it at lower rents. And so the biggest thing to help these projects is that commitment to getting these projects permitted quicker. I know that now Mayor Higgins is in her new role at the city of Miami is trying to implement and use this project as an example of the ability to show that it can be done. If everyone is pulling in the same direction, then there should be no reason why you can't obtain a permit in 90 to 100 days for any type of project of this scale.
So you pulled a permit within 120 days?
107 days.
107 days. That's unheard of. For the audience that doesn't know how important that permitting process is, and I think you touched a little bit on it, right? The financing, the bids, the assumptions, like they'll go bad over time, right?
Mhm.
You'll have to change them. How important is it to have the government involved with these projects? And I guess why with this specific project, and how come they haven't done it with other ones previously?
So I think that, government is always a little slow to react and accept change. Um, and it's incumbent upon private industry to educate those elected officials who are trying to solve for the affordable housing and workforce housing dilemma. You know, these are the levers that you need to push in order to help us execute, because it really is about that. It's about speed to execution. If you're if you again, if it takes you a year or longer to obtain a permit, you're kind of you're kind of running, but you're kind of like that hamster in the little wheel. You're running, but you're not getting anywhere. And you're not getting anywhere. Why? Because you're not able to commence that project. And if you're not able to start, then everything goes stale. You know, your numbers are stale, your financing is stale, your investors might leave, right? You can
Yeah.
also lose investors. They're not going to wait and hold their investment if you can't break ground on your project, if they have someone else that is willing to go quicker, right? Capital wants certainty, right? If you're going to invest, you want certainty. You want certainty in your investment and how that's going to work out there. So the most important thing that the government could do to help these type of projects is to work together with the developers to make sure that you can obtain these permits in a much quicker fashion. And again, we showed that it can be done here.
So, for example, this specific project that we're in right now, this development, it was a combination of private sector, public sector working together. And I think the idea, and I think for most people, whenever you're building affordable housing or workforce housing, it doesn't look good. It's not appealing. It's cheap. But this building is very far from that. There's high-end finishes. Look how nice this amenity room is. How important is that when you're looking at a development? So what are you taking into consideration when you're obviously you're constrained on different areas, right? With the financing and how you're going to structure the deal, but to build products that people actually want to live in.
Yeah, so for us, you know, we pride ourselves on our design and our architecture and our interior finishes. We're always going to design our projects to a market rate standard. We have interior designers that work on our market rate projects, and so we start there. We don't start trying to design a project that is to a lower standard. We always start designing a project to a higher standard, and then do we have a mix of incomes, because we're always going to have some units that are unrestricted, like in this project, you know, 60 70 of the units are unrestricted. So in order to get that tenant, you have to build to a certain standard. So rather than try to build, we don't try to build to a lower standard and try to, charge more for that. We do it in the inverse. We build to a high standard, and the affordable and workforce tenants will benefit from that higher standard.
Interesting. So how long does it take for one of these buildings to get leased up? So once you have it officially ready to go, how long does it take for people to move in here? Is the demand uh, big?
Yeah, the demand is big, especially on the income restricted units, whether they're affordable or workforce. For instance, in this building, they're all leased out already. And it's been 2 or 3 months that we opened the building.
Wow.
So we typically have a long waiting list of residents looking for units. We also have a very robust pipeline. So we've opened a lot of buildings, um, and so people kind of follow, and they're always looking to see what's the next building that Relate Urban is going to open. We had a very successful launch, a few blocks from here, our Magnus Brickell project. That was our largest project to date. 29 stories, 465 units, mix of market, workforce, and affordable. Um, was leased out in record time. That's 6 7 months. $190 million project. It
Wow.
was the largest project financed by JP Morgan Chase south of New York City in the whole country. So that showed also what I was talking about earlier, that you build to a certain standard, your market acceptance will be there, because people are going to say, wow, this is a great place to live in. So there's we're fortunate to again to have a very robust pipeline and always breaking ground on some new buildings and always opening a few new ones.
So where do you see the next opportunity or next market in Miami that it's not there yet, but in the next 5 to 10 years, we're gonna see development?
So look, I think there's a couple of market areas that have very good promise. I think the city of South Miami is one of those areas. We have a few projects in that area now. That's very centrally located. It's in and around mass transit. It's right there by the University of Miami, right off of US 1. It also has good access to the highways there. I think that's one city that historically hadn't had a lot of multifamily type of development. It was a little bit more of a sleeper city. So I think that's one. And again, we're actively working on several projects there. I think the other area that I think has a big promise is the UM Jackson Hospital area. The
Alapata, that area?
Gorrita and the Civic Center. We've got a few projects in that area now. That was an area that was historically just kind of like dormant in the evening, certainly, but there's a big workforce there. There's the whole judicial system there's the court system. There's also obviously three hospital systems there. You have the VA hospital, UM Hospital, Jackson Hospital, all of the transplant institutes in that area. So we have several projects in that area also, and it's also a 24/7 workforce area because of those hospitals. So we like that area. There's I would think a lot of promise in that area, and I think that there's the a little bit further area of Alapata too. I think just a little bit north of the Civic Center. I think is an important area, and certainly the Liberty City area. I think is another area that historically had a very uh, bad reputation. But we've one of our largest projects in Miami is the redevelopment of Liberty Square. That was a 50-acre project, 9 city blocks, tough area. When we got there a few years ago, it was anytime you saw the first 48 hour show on TV, it was usually filmed on set there. That's how tough that area was. But we've been able to get in there, and we've now completed 4 phases. 800 units are done. We have another 600 units currently under construction, and totally turned the area around. We were able to rehouse all the families that were there. All of the original families that were on site when we got there all now have new homes. But more importantly, it's also a mixed income development where we have some of those subsidized families living with affordable families, workforce families, and some market rate families. So I think that area is very well positioned geographically also to thrive. It's just, it's right by the highway, right by 95, just north of the design district and Midtown. And look what's happened there,
Yeah.
and Wynwood. So I think that's another natural area to thrive because the geographic location of that area is, is very good.
What's your opinion on the Live Local Act as a development tool?
Yeah, I had the opportunity to participate in the initial draft of Live Local with Senator Calatayud, and I think and at the time Senate President Kathleen Pasadomo. I think it's a great tool. I think it is the most comprehensive housing legislation in the country, by far. I think there's a lot of states now trying to see how they can um, use Live Local to do some of the developments that they're looking at doing. I think it was a it needed there needed to be a bold initiative at the state level in order to address the issue of the missing middle housing, right? Because I think the state legislature and the governor realized that for Florida to continue growing, they needed housing for that missing middle. As I mentioned previously, the tax credit program historically stopped at 60%. And with the last tax legislation in 2017, it allowed you to go up to 80 in certain instances with income averaging, but it stopped there. So there were no benefits for 80 or above. And so the majority of that professional workforce was in that missing middle is 80 to 120. And so what programs were there available for that? There weren't any. And so that was the inspiration behind the local. Um, and it was also a production tool. As I was saying, you need to increase production. You need to have more supply. Simple economics. That's what's going to lower prices, right? If you have constrained supply and you have 100 people looking for 30 units, then obviously those 30 units are going to cost more, right? You have more demand than you have supply. If you can increase that pool to 200 units, now that pricing is going to go down. So it's simple economics, and that's the premise behind Live Local. It was a production tool to try to address those units that were missing between 80 and 120%. Like any legislation of that size, there's always some need to make some adjustments and some improvements. And I think that's happened over the last 2 or 3 sessions. I think the legislature has now tweaked it and made it even better for the production of those missing middle units.
So what are your thoughts on Miami today from pre-pandemic and where we're at, especially in a development? On your lens as a developer, what do you think about that?
So I think there are some challenges on the horizon. I think COVID um, was was obviously a once in a lifetime event. Hopefully, we never have to experience anything like that.
Oh yeah.
Certainly in my lifetime, um, but it created additional an influx of additional people coming to the state of Florida and mostly Miami. A lot of those new residents are brought with them either remote jobs or their actual businesses relocated to Miami, and that has brought and with them they brought higher incomes. So that's a good thing, right? From a economic perspective, the buying power within um, the city is gone up, right? The city and the county. Conversely, the challenge with some of that is that data is what's used by HUD to produce their annual figures for area median incomes every year. And so, and those charts for area median income are the ones that are used for some of these subsidy programs. Um, and what we've seen over the last 5 years, and the 26 figures are about to be released, but we've already seen them because we have consultants that um, we work with us and they share the data prior to being adopted. It'll be adopted now May 1st. But it's going to be close to a 10% increase again, 9.93, I believe is the exact number. Um, and so over the last 5 years, we've seen basically a 50% increase in AMIs between 21 and 26. And so on the one side, like I said, it's good because you have more economic buying power come to Miami. However, what that also means is these are area median incomes, they're county wide. That puts the pressure on the local workforce, right? The local teacher, the local government workers, local workforce, regardless of where you work, because their salaries have not gone up 50% since 21 to 26. And so that what used to be, I mean, to put it into perspective, a 60% of AMI income and the resident or family in 21 now is 110, right? And so that when those rent charts come out and they're based on these higher AMIs, it creates a lot of stress, for the workers. I mean, Well, like we were sharing earlier, um, teachers, starting teachers now are going to be 60% of AMI
Wow.
based upon when the AMIs come out. State attorneys, a lot of other things, they're going to be under 80% of AMI.
So then what
Um,
part of the cycle are we in right now in the development real estate cycle? Because if the bottom, if the working population here is being compressed, right? They're feeling the stress right now. I guess where do you see Miami in the cycle?
yeah, so I think again, it goes back to the demand is continuing to grow because that pressure is only creating more demand. So I think it's incumbent upon the private sector to lead and work with the public sector. Again, we have to increase that supply. So we have to be more innovative, right? We have to unlock certain parcels that might be underutilized or not being maximized to their highest and best use. And how do we redevelop some of these sites, which is some of the projects that we're working on, like our project Galleria Wagner Creek. That's a project that we were awarded about a year ago in partnership with Jackson Hospital Systems, right? They realized that they have a recruitment and retainment problem. So Jackson says, "Hey, we have this parking lot, we have this and an old office building. How do we what can we do with this to repurpose this?" And so we responded to a solicitation, and we were awarded the project. And now we're working on a project that's going to be adjacent to their campus, right there by the Jackson Metro Station. 460 units of housing with a preference for their employees, right? So that's an example of an employer taking their destiny into their own hands and saying we need to what used to be an afterthought, housing was an afterthought, right? The employer didn't have to think about whether they were going to have to provide housing to their employees. Now they have to think about that. Now it's important to think about that, and that's just one example. We were also last month we were awarded our first development opportunity in partnership with Miami-Dade County Public Schools. Same situation. The school system has realized they have older assets, underutilized assets, and they also have a recruitment and retainment problem. So we're going to be redeveloping that project in the city of South Miami in partnership with them, with a preference for their employees. And so I think that's the natural evolution of where housing is going, especially workforce and affordable housing. I think employers are going to have to pay more attention to that issue. And what used to maybe not be considered a benefit, now it might have to be looked at as a benefit, right? At least certainly in a way where if they have the ability with their current assets to reimagine how they work, and how they use their properties, that's something that I think is going to continue to have additional momentum of how we again increase supply.
So switching over, I want to talk a little bit about 2008, the housing market, because I think it's important to share your perspective on that and what you saw. I guess how were you able to navigate during that time?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. Actually, during that downturn, at that point, I had my own company, which is Urban Development Group, and that's actually and I had been doing, different affordable housing projects. That's when, through an attorney, a local attorney here, put me together with George Perez, at the time, who wanted to uh, be more active in the affordable housing space. And he was always in this. He started actually the company with affordable housing and then grew into market rate and condos. And I guess more of the related group is more known for that higher end
Yeah.
product line. But at that time is when the attorney kind of got us together, and we formed Related Urban Development Group. It was exactly in April of 2009. So um, we are. actually 2008. The and then we started the company, and that's how we put everything in place. Started again with a lot of the public private partnerships. I had some of that experience. I had done some of that work before, and that allowed us to get the venture going. um but that crisis also showed that you can't have runaway pricing, right? That's part of what happened there. Now that was mostly because of you know very lax financing. There were just everyone was able to get um, financing regardless of income. There was not a lot of verification in the process, so that created just too much uh, un unneeded demand, right? The demand was not true demand. It was blown up with some of this excess lending, and so I think there's a lot of protections in place now. Now some of this production that you're seeing is not leveraged like that was. That doesn't mean that there's not, the ability to have corrections in the market, because the market was a little bit overheated. So you're seeing a lot of projects now that are having a tougher time coming to fruition, but it's a function of interest rates, or interest rates are still high, at least compared to where they were during COVID, but historically they're not high. And so if you've been in this business long enough, you know, then you know that the current interest rate market is still not unfavorable. It's, from a historical perspective, it's kind of the right sort of numbers. It's just that it is much higher than what it was during COVID and the pandemic, where there was a lot of government stimulation into the market.
Do you think Miami is going to enter into some form of correction or softening?
See, I don't think so. I don't think that. I mean, I think there'll be a slower acceleration on the top of the market. So I don't think you're gonna see 9-10% increases. I think it'll be more muted increases. But I don't see a major downshift or correction, if you will. I just see a slower pace of growth on the top.
Where do you see the future of Miami going into the next 10 to 15 years?
I think Miami, we kind of we were that fun in the sun type city, but it's now evolved into a more well-respected city, in the sense of, you have a lot of great cultural institutions here now. You're seeing a lot of the financial institutions continue to expand here. You're seeing some of the Wall Street firms now setting their flag here in Miami, along with the tech firms. So what used to be more of a lower sector based economy is kind of changed, and once those companies establish themselves here, which is what's been happening, I don't see that trend being reversed, because when you consider us, when you factor in our weather compared to some of the other states around the country, when you consider our tax environment, where you have no state income taxes, and conversely you have other states around the country where they're continuing to talk about how they're going to implement higher and higher taxes on higher income people. And I think that that's a mistake, because what they fail to realize is, like, at some point you're going to tax them out of your city, which I think is what you're seeing, right? Because they have options. The options are to move their capital to somewhere where their investments produce, better returns. And when you're looking at your investments, you're gonna consider taxation as part of those investments. So I think that bodes favorably for the state of Florida, and certainly for Miami, to continue to have that growth, right? And I think that I don't see any trends that would kind of lead us to, wait, we're gonna have some major correction here. If anything, uh, I see us continuing to have a bigger demand for the type of housing that we build. It's like it's almost like we can't build it fast enough, right? We open a project and it's, boom, it's all the units are spoken for because of that demand. And as those businesses relocate, they're going to create more jobs, and that's really what we need, right? We need to housing and jobs kind of go together. The housing can't grow too far ahead of the jobs, right? You want that job growth to continue, to support the housing.
Yeah, so it's interesting. I'm seeing a large portion of the like millennials and Gen Zs. They're looking to live more in the urban core than out west in Kendall or Homestead, just because of how bad the transportation is down there, right? The traffic just to move around. So I agree with you. I think the affordable housing component, especially in these pockets, you guys are gonna have a pretty easy time renting them up. You know.
Yeah, I mean that we're urban builders, right? We're not, we've got one or two projects, down south. But most of our projects are from the city of South Miami, in here to the urban core and a little bit north. But but yeah, there's gonna be those more established older neighborhoods are gonna be redeveloped into different vertical type of developments. And you're right. I mean, the younger generation. I mean, who wants to spend an hour in a car each way?
I don't.
Right? I mean, it's just not it's not it affects your quality of life, and there's also a difference in the thought process of the younger generations too with a car as a whole. There's a lot of our tenants that they're like they don't even have a car, and it's fine. When I was growing up, that was unheard of, right? As soon as you were 16 years old, you want to go get your license, and it's like I need to go get a car, right? And whatever, right? But it's a different thought process. Now it's like, why do I want a car? Why do I have to deal with the car? I'll just get an Uber. Now you go get a Waymo, right? And
Yeah.
all of those type of things are gonna continue to drive that cost down of transportation. And if I can live closer to my job, and if I can live closer to where I want to go and entertain, and where I want to go and eat, and where I want to go watch a movie, then yeah, why would I want to live, further out?
No, I agree with you. Albert, is there anything you want to leave off to the community or anybody that's watching this video?
Oh, I think, for us and for me personally, it's a personal thing. Or I take the production of our housing and our projects personally, right? Because as you mentioned earlier, I was born and raised in this town. I mean, I have four children, and I want to make sure that uh, the young professionals in Miami that also were born and raised here have the opportunity to stay here, right? I don't want Miami to become uh, a city and a county where every young professional has to be faced with the dilemma of like I can't afford to live here. I've done everything I was asked to do. I've gone to college. I've earned my degree. I want to start my business. I want to get you know s- um, move ahead, but I just can't afford housing, and I certainly don't want to live in my parents' home, till I'm 45. So I think for me, it's a personal thing to be able to continue to build these type of projects to help that next generation, get the opportunity that I was able to have when I was starting off in this business, and not have to be faced with moving to Georgia, moving to North Carolina, moving somewhere else. So I thank you for the opportunity for
Thank you.
this interview. But and again, we're going to continue to build these type of projects in the future.
I'm excited to see what the future holds. If you guys enjoy this content, like, subscribe, and comment down below. Albert, again, thank you for your time.
Thank you.